Hey, this is Lauren coming in with Digital Nomad Lifestyle, your resource for tips, advice around being a digital nomad without any of the bullshit. So today I'm coming in with the comprehensive list of pros and cons for being a digital nomad. So I came up with this list over the years of me being a digital nomad and kind of traveling the world. And then I also did some research on different articles, and there's a lot of cool resources out there. And I came up with a comprehensive list of all the pros and cons of being a digital nomad. So starting off, we're going to be doing pros. And essentially I broke it down into 6 different themes that both have pros and cons to make it a little bit easier. So starting off, number 1 is going to be quality of life. So exploration. Obviously, when you're exploring things and you're running around in different countries all the time, it makes life a lot more exciting. When you're sitting at home, you're driving to the same job every day, you're seeing the same people, seeing the same landscapes. It's really easy for your mind to get habituated to that, and you kind of start taking that for granted. When you are traveling, your mind cannot get habituated to things that quickly, so you're seeing new things. It literally makes your life more exciting from a psychological perspective. On that same note, when you come back, you find that you actually appreciate what you have at home a lot more when you're gone more often. I know for me, I appreciate Denver. I live most of my time in Denver. I would say 6 to 8 months of the year I'm in Denver, and I appreciate Denver a lot more when I'm traveling and leaving and then coming back. Another one is going to be flexibility and schedule. So you're not going to have some manager on most jobs looking over your back every 2 to 3 minutes, asking you what you're doing. You can kind of get work done on your own schedule when you want to work. So you can kind of make your life work around that, which is really nice. Another one is going to be freedom of expression. So if anybody who's heard this story, I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing it, but essentially a big reason why I started my own business is because I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and I was told if I kept wearing that Hawaiian shirt, I wouldn't be able to keep the job, right? So right now I'm working without a shirt on. If you were in an office, regardless of your gender, you're probably not going to be able to do that, right? And so that freedom of expression is really nice, and it kind of manifests itself in a lot of different ways. The second theme is going to be quality of traveling. So you're traveling a lot longer, therefore you're able to kind of get a little bit better idea of the country, and you're not just running around the whole time. The sort of cliche, I think it's a little pretentious way of wording it, is like, it's a more authentic traveling, and you're getting to know the locals and like all that stuff that you hear every other travel blogger talk about. It is kind of true though. So the longer that you're there, obviously the deeper connections you're going to make, the more you're going to understand the country that you're in, and you're probably going to have a little bit better experiences. I know, at least for quality of traveling, not having to run around. Unfortunately, when I went to Spain for 8 days. I got a killer deal on the ticket, but looking back, really, it would have been better off to spend more money on a ticket and have at least 2, 3, 4 weeks in Spain rather than having to run around for 8 days. It was way too short. When you're working as a digital nomad, you can travel more often. Okay. So friends, family, and connections. So on the plus side, it's a lot easier to make new friends while you're traveling because generally you're in a little more of a vulnerable position. People kind of have their guards down a little bit easier, which is nice. So it's easier to kind of meet people from other countries who are traveling in that country as well. Usually you have a lot to talk about right off the bat because you're both traveling in that country. You're usually going to find a little more similarities with those people than maybe some people that you maybe meet back home in some cases. Another one is going to be also along that lines of staying longer. It's easier to make friends and build connections where you're at and where you're traveling with quote unquote locals, as they'd say. So next one is money and finances. So your money can go further depending on which country you're going to, right? If you're going Latin America, Southeast Asia, you can get pretty far. Africa, you can get pretty far. Even Eastern Europe, you can get pretty far if you have a Western salary. And then also, you can also make more money in your job. So if you're working remote, as a business owner myself, I don't have to pay for the office. I don't have to pay for, you're usually not going to get benefits either, but usually cutting some of those benefits around health insurance and stuff like that and putting that on your plate usually means that you're making more per hour. And then the last one in the money area is going to be materialism. So this is one that I know some people really get into, is the simplistic and minimalistic lifestyle. For me, I would say I am pretty My place is pretty Spartan. I mean, as you can see, there's nothing on the walls really. I mean, I have a bed and then I have a desk that I work at. And so it is kind of nice to like not have as much clutter just sitting around and as much stuff hanging around your neck as it were. I mean, I still love fast cars, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm like living like a monk up in the middle of nowhere. But you can kind of start to remove yourself from that materialism if that's something that's important to you. So next one is no office or boring routine. So driving, I know for me here in Denver, I-25 is a big highway that I sat on for probably altogether about 2 hours there and back at my previous job, and it slowly killed me inside. So those commutes, you get rid of those commutes, which is really, really nice, right? So there's also less office politics bullshit. So you'll find that you won't have quite as many politics, that your interpersonal relationships are a little bit easier when you're working remote because you're not just cramped into the same office every single day with the same people. That's one thing I know for me, I really appreciate a lot more. The last one is going to be learning and growth. So in that area, it's a lot easier to grow as an individual when you're traveling because when you meet people, they're not expecting the character that you've put together over the years, right? With our friends and family, we kind of try to build this character of who we want strangers and other people to view us as. You'll find that when you meet people on the road, they obviously don't have any of those preconceptions. And so it's a lot easier for you to start to like shift and grow because people aren't expecting you to act certain ways and to react in certain ways and to be a certain way. That sort of character that you've tried to convey to everybody isn't there when you're meeting new people, right? So it's a little bit easier for personal growth there too. Biases are a big one. So obviously we're all inherently biased as much as we want to believe that we're going to go to some foreign country where people are living magically and there's no racism and there's no anything. That's actually not the way the world works, right? But there is something about your own biases and shifting those because you're in a place that has a lot different biases than your own. And so it does force you to kind of look at things. Oh, well, what does polite mean, right? If you go into China and specifically Eastern Asia, I would say outside of Japan, Vietnam, China, and you have ideas of being polite, and those are American ideas, you're going to find that your ideas of being polite are very different from a Vietnamese or a Chinese person. And you can take that and get angry about it and get pissed off, or you can just recognize, okay, maybe being polite is a little more relative than I thought it was originally. Then kind of along that idea of the biases, just kind of more understanding. If you are introspective about it, and I don't do a very good job of this, but if you are introspective about it and you remember those lessons that you've learned while you're traveling, you can be more understanding at home too with people because you're not quite as rigid in your thoughts. So moving on to cons, quality of life. So it can be hard to separate your work from the vacation or even your home. I know I've worked about 16 hours one day in a hotel in Mexico. A lot of people would say, dude, why the hell, like that doesn't feel like a vacation at all, right? You're just busting your ass. That is the reality of working as a digital nomad, unless you want to lose your job or lose your clients. There are going to be days where you're just working, and there's going to be times when other people are going out and having fun and doing stuff, and at that moment you'll have to work. That is kind of that can be a downside for a lot of people. I know for me, I don't like sitting around and not doing anything and just enjoying life for too long. Like I need to have some productivity in my life. So for me, it really makes sense. I can't sit on a beach for longer than a couple hours or I start losing my mind. And so it's not for everybody. So next one is people not understanding you. So along that idea of traveling longer, what you'll find is that if you do want to spend time a little bit longer and you are getting to know the locals better, then you'll see that a lot of those people aren't going to understand you the same way that people from your own culture will. So I know in Vietnam, I spent a year in Vietnam, and I found that it didn't really matter how good my Vietnamese was, how I only used chopsticks, like how I didn't hang out with any Westerners. It didn't matter how much I did that. I was still always going to be American, and it was in my face all the time. And so if you're fortunate enough to kind of be in a majority spot in the country that you're from and you move to another country where you're a minority all of a sudden, it can help you with seeing things from a different view, but that shit is difficult. It's not easy. It's really nice to be a white guy in America for a number of reasons. One being is I can just walk in a coffee shop and nobody gives a shit about what I'm doing. They're not staring at me. They're not asking me about my sleep schedule to try to get insights about, how do white men sleep all the time? Because I'm very average looking in America, right? And so that shit can get old after a while. Next one, quality of life. Everything is a little bit harder in a foreign country. If you're trying to get some money, if you're trying to do basic things, pay rent, pay electricity bills, especially if you don't know the language, everything can be a little bit harder. Even if you know the language, it can be pretty tough just because obviously processes and practices and stuff like that are a little bit different. So that can be rough as well. Next one is going to be lots of uncomfortability. You'll find that you are going to be uncomfortable more often than not when you're in a foreign country, especially at the beginning. And at a certain point, even if it takes you 2, 3, 4 weeks to get comfortable, you may find that, oh man, once I'm starting to kind of get in my groove, and then now I got to leave or go to another city or go back home or check out another country or what have you. So that can be a little taxing after times for sure. The next one is going to be routines. So it can be a little hard when you're traveling to set up routines. And so you can feel a little disorganized mentally, and that can kind of wear on you after a while if you're just partying and not really paying attention to taking care of yourself and building solid routines. Next one is quality of traveling. So on the flip side of the quality of traveling, you are tied to Wi-Fi. There are satellite options and other things that I'll likely explore in the future and teach you guys about, but in a lot of ways you're not going to be able to go in the middle of the Amazon with zero electricity for 3 weeks and live off the land, right? Because you are tied to Wi-Fi. I was fortunate enough to get Wi-Fi in the Ecuadorian Andes in the middle of kind of nowhere. This teeny little town that actually had sheep walking up and down the streets. It was such a small town that the people's first language actually was Quechua. It wasn't even Spanish. And so when they talked to each other, it was all in Quechua, which is pretty cool. The town probably had maybe 100 people. I was fortunate enough to figure out how to get fast enough Wi-Fi to have an hour and a half Zoom meeting with only 1 mild interruption. So there are workarounds, but it is one thing that you have to really consider, and it's something that can be different from kind of traditional traveling where you're not really working and worrying about that stuff. The next thing around quality of traveling is that you have to work, man, or you're going to lose your clients, you're going to lose business, right? And so that is one thing you're going to miss out on stuff. So the next one is friends, family, and connections. So there is obviously isolation when you're working remote or even working from home in general. So that's one thing that you are going to have to deal with. I know for me, I was so happy to get out of an office that it doesn't really bother me all that much, but if you're not careful, it can be incredibly isolating if you're not taking time to meet with friends, to get out and to do stuff, for sure. Another one, you're not going to be as close to friends and family back home, so you kind of need to realize that. Over this summer, I had what I would consider a near-death experience while I was riding my bike from Athens to Istanbul, and I told some of my friends and family back home about it, and none of them really cared that much. They're like, dude, you're always doing something stupid. It's really not that big of a deal. And the sort of support, emotional support that I was looking for wasn't really there because you're just constantly gone. And so people emotionally, you will find that they will kind of remove a little bit, especially when you're not in town, because you're gone all the time. And so that's kind of just part of the thing, So missing milestones is going to be another one. I was fortunate. I made it to my best friend's wedding this summer, but you can miss birthdays, weddings, hopefully not anniversaries. But you can miss stuff while you're traveling all the time, right? And so that is something that is a drawback for sure. Next is going to be dating and relationships. So dating and relationships is a little bit more difficult on the road than it is when you're living in the same place, right? It's not that it's impossible, but it can be a lot more difficult. And the pool of people that you can date constricts quite a bit if you want to get into long-term serious relationships. Next one is going to be money. And so getting consistent payment can be a little difficult if you are freelancing or running your own business or contracting or something like that. Your payment, you'll find that payment is a lot more variable than it was before. So on the plus side, that can mean that you get better at budgeting, but that can make it more difficult than a traditional 40-hour job week where you can depend on the same amount of money every week. So in the office and boring routine area, there are Christmas parties and camaraderie. So when asked, that's the only thing that I actually miss from working in an office is the Christmas parties, going out for drinks on like a Friday afternoon. Building that can be really difficult. You can still build that with a group of other digital nomads in your area. I know that here in Denver, if anybody is in Denver and they're interested in being part of it, we do have a meetup on the first Friday of every month. And so you can still kind of build some of that camaraderie, but it's not built in the same way that it is when you go into an office. So last one is going to be on that learning and growing. And so your life is going to look a lot different than your friends. So I am going to be 30 years old here in about 2 months. And right now I do not own a home. I don't have any kids and I'm not married. And so according to a lot of people's metrics, that's kind of a wasted life, right? And so you do have to recognize that if you're comparing yourself to other people along those lines, you're going to feel like you're kind of falling behind. Once again, these things aren't impossible, and there's plenty of people who do travel the world and manage all those things as well. But for most people, you're going to find that it's a lot more difficult to build that sort of traditional trajectory when you're traveling all the time. So, final thoughts. The answer everyone wants to know. Should I be a digital nomad? And I have a question for you, and the answer to this question will determine whether or not you should be a digital nomad. Do you prefer freedom over security? That'll give you your answer as far as I'm concerned. So this is Lauren with Digital Nomad Lifestyle. If you're interested in getting tips and advice on being a digital nomad or becoming a better digital nomad and being able to travel the world more freely, follow me on Instagram at Official Digital Nomad Lifestyle. We have a Facebook group and we're on YouTube with Digital Nomad Lifestyle and then also digitalnomadlifestyle.com. All right, until next time.